And let me go ahead and move us forward and introduce Suzanne Kounkel. I've had an opportunity over the last 6 years to work with Deloitte, and I can say that this is a wonderful company with a rich intellectual personality. The intellectual capital is extraordinary, and it's just such a delight to have Suzanne with us today. She is not only the Chief Marketing Officer of Deloitte, she's also a principal within Deloitte Consulting. And although maybe she can explain the organizational structure, but she was also the CMO of Deloitte Consulting. So she's had dual CMO roles within Deloitte. So she's had a lot of opportunity to see clients struggle with these questions of purpose and how marketing can be activated in these ways. And not only that, but she has run Deloitte's all-important US consulting in the tech sector. So she's seen how Deloitte and how companies need to really leverage technology for good. And so I think that's also a very nice angle that she has that's kind of unique on this problem. In addition to all of her regular work-related things, she's led the Women's Initiative in Consulting, which works to significantly increase the number of women in these types of market-facing roles. And she sits on the board of directors for the Ad Council and is a member of the Adweek Diversity and Inclusion Council, as well as a member of the ANA's Global CMO Growth Council, where she works to help CMOs leverage data and technology to connect with their customers. So thank you so much, Suzanne, for joining us. We look forward to your comments.
Great. Well, thank you to you and also to Hari for having me here. And I am very grateful, Lisa, to be in your presence as well and to hear your comments. And most of all, just as sort of a warm up for all of you in the audience, all four of us are really looking forward to the questions because that'll be a great time for you guys to direct what is a very broad topic into things that are, kind of near and dear to what's weighing on your minds. But as Christine mentioned, I am the US Chief Marketing Officer for Deloitte. Let me just tell you a little bit I have all of the traditional CMO responsibilities. I have brand sponsorships. I have all of the offering and the industry portfolio marketing. I have PR, internal comms, and external comms. Just to make my job a little bit more interesting, I also have a lot of things on the sales support side. So I'm responsible for our CRM system, our sales executives, and our global or our US-based pursuit centers. So that gives you a little bit of context for where my comments are coming from. But beyond that, I spent about the first, kind of 15 to 20 years of my professional career advising clients on how to use marketing and sales for greater growth and effectiveness in the marketplace. So I will try to weave in a little bit of that, not only the things that I'm seeing from the seat I currently sit in, but also things that I'm seeing as I look across industries and various types of organizations. Just a quick brief background on Deloitte. We are, and I really appreciate Christine, your kind remarks on the firm. We are a 175-year-old private company, and we are currently a partnership, which makes everything very, very interesting. But certainly you don't become a 175-year-old brand without really looking at the marketplace and evolving to current state things, both with your customers, your set of offerings, and who you are as an organization, while still remaining really true to who you are. So you're actually always trying to evolve for sure, but also stay true to who you are. And I think we've done that exceptionally well. We're over $50 billion in global revenue. We have about 350,000 people globally. Again, just to give you some sense of who we are, we serve most of the Fortune Global 500 companies and just do a lot of different types of activities. And I really feel blessed because Deloitte has always been a very purpose-driven organization. Again, that has been really who we are, and it has shown up in a lot of things that we had the first female board chair of a US professional services company back in 2003. We had the first female CEO back in 2015. We had early days, we had a lot of things around, like I was the leader of the Women's Initiative, where we were paying very close attention to the diversity of our workforce and why people were leaving. We, in the middle of the financial crisis in 2007, we decided to make a $300 million capital investment. Remember, we're a partnership, so those kinds of investments are a big deal for us to build Deloitte University. So again, I believe that I'm very lucky that I am surrounded by leaders and an organization that really values purpose. But I will tell you that even with that rich heritage and with a leadership table that is very concerned about this, whether it was the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, all of the, the health equity issues that were raised in the middle of the pandemic, all of those things meant that we had to reinterpret, re-up, rethink what our stance was around purpose and how it was going to show up to our people and to our customers every single day. We do a report that's called the Annual Global Marketing Trends Research. And in that, which I think, this is something I think a lot about in my CMO role and that we should all think about in the roles that we play. It's the notion that 1 out of 5 customers will support a brand that has taken positive action. So if your customers believe that you are true to your purpose and they believe in your purpose, they will richly reward you for that. But also 1 in 4, so remember that's obviously more, will walk away if they don't think that either you're doing the things that they want you to do, or they don't like what they're seeing. So I think that's really important. Lisa mentioned the Edelman Trust Barometer and the notion that people really are looking for companies to step into this, and they trust companies, they trust CEOs. There's this notion that, again, I think you mentioned, Lisa, that 86% of people expect their CEOs, they want to see their CEOs wading into these waters. And I think the other big conclusion about the Edelman Trust survey was that trust is local. So people really do want to see people around them. They have a lot of distrust for sort of amorphous big things that they don't, that they can't really sort of see and touch, but trust is truly local. And I think there are some interesting nuances to that we should all think about. Okay, so the one thing that, and I think we've touched on this a little bit as well, Lisa, but one of the things that I always say is that the really important thing about purpose, when you think about it, is that it is a strategic priority. It is who you are as an organization, but it needs to be interpreted through the actions of your organization every day. And everything that you do outweighs everything you say. And so that I think a lot about with respect to a marketing organization. I do believe that the CMO has an unusually, Lisa used the word superpower, which is one of my favorite words as well. I believe the CMO and the marketing organization has a lot of superpowers that are really critical to the purpose conversation. But I also always am fond of saying is that if you're a CMO or a marketing organization that believe you have the only voice on the topic of purpose, you will get into trouble. Because, I talk a lot about how the CMO can be the orchestrator and the storyteller around purpose. But if you aren't thinking through it through every lens, right? Lisa mentioned products. If you're not thinking about what your supply chain is either doing or eroding with respect to your purpose, what your actual product does, the way your people are treated and onboarded and recruited and all of those sorts of things, all of those things are really, really critical to that. So again, I do think the CMOs have an unusual role to play in this, but I always like to tell my team that we can be orchestrators, we can be storytellers, but if we're the solitary voice, we will get into trouble. And a big part of that orchestration is the sort of notion of taking big aspirations and purpose and grounding it in the little things that matter, right? I'm fond of saying that life is lived in the small moments of every day. And I think purpose is really true to that, right? And so I'll give you an example. When we were, I mentioned that we have a lot of people, we serve all industries, we serve a lot of different kind of corporations. So we've really had to wrestle with where are we at with the, I always say it's the highest intersection point between your purpose and your mission as an organization, and that should be where you choose to lean in on. And so for us, one of the things that popped up very quickly was we wanted to be a force for good with respect to climate. But of course, if you take a look at what we do and how we do it, we couldn't continue to do the things exactly like we did them 10 years ago and say that we were an advocate for climate, because we have too many people on planes, just to be super crass. And while that sounds like an easy thing, it actually meant that we had to change the way we thought about delivering our services, which for us is like basically re-engineering your product and your supply chain and all of those sorts of things. So that was a big thing that we had to really think through, is how do we actually get fewer people on fewer flights on the climate topic. But a little thing that we had to really grapple with was, okay, so let's do the big things, and can maybe counterintuitively, oftentimes it's the big things that are actually easier for people to kind of tackle. But we looked up and we said, well, hold on here, for 350,000 people, we're having a lot of meetings and a lot of catering that comes into those meetings, and we're having a lot of single-use water bottles. So that was a little thing where we said, our people won't let us say that we're being true to climate if we're generating that much plastic each and every day. So I do think this notion of really sort of grappling with what it is in your organization that either contributes and reinforces and underlines your purpose, and really then rooting through and making changes on the things that undermine it is important. And I do believe that you don't have to solve all of that overnight. It's impossible to, but you do need to have a plan to where you will get there. And you have to acknowledge that what is contributing to it and what you need to kind of get into. So that's a little bit about kind of what we're doing with respect to purpose and that sort of thing. I think there's a lot of areas where, as academics, you could help us. I think that there are lots of things that we sense have really changed on the purpose front. And some of those things we are sensing, but we don't actually know. So you could actually help us figure out whether or not that is true and work with us to really ground a lot of these things in research. So let me give you some examples. I think that you've heard, you've heard certainly from Lisa, you've heard from me, you've heard from, kind of general press and the great pieces that were published in the journal, right? Around, we all sense that being neutral is no longer acceptable. There was a time and a place where if you were really nervous on the brand side, you could kind of stay quiet. I call it kind of the duck and cover strategy. We believe that that is no longer an effective strategy, and both your customers and your employees will keep you honest on that. But technically, we don't know whether that's true, right? And in that world, and Lisa mentioned, like, sometimes you make choices out of fear, right? There are people that are making choices out of fear, and they believe that sometimes being neutral is okay. I will tell you another thing that we could use some more research on is, if you think about the ROI of purpose, there's a lot of language that is pretty qualitative and sort of fluffy around how you actually measure the ROI on purpose. And I think that when we get really good at this, we'll be able to tie that down. I think a big thing that we need to do, though, is make sure that we don't confuse purpose and profit. And again, you need the highest intersection between those two things because they're mutually self-enforcing. If you don't have profit, you won't be around to have purpose. And if you don't have purpose, you won't have profit over time either. That's how starkly we think about this. We believe that you won't get the best people, and we believe that your customers won't stick with you over the longer term. In the shorter term, yes, maybe. Another area where we could use some help is a lot of organizations are struggling with, I want longer range metrics around purpose because a lot of these things are not easily solved overnight. I want to be able to look out. I want to know that we're making a 5-10-year commitment, 25-year commitment to these things. But if I don't have, and I want to be able to shoot for the moon. But if I don't have the right short-term metrics, then I don't know that I'm actually tracking to meet the long-term. And it can be sort of a, well, next quarter we'll do more, and the next quarter we'll do more. So what is the right balance of the portfolio of those metrics that really keep us honest on both of those fronts? I think there's a lot of work around how do companies really find, there's two things I talk a lot about to my team is that, I'll say three things and then I'd love to go to Q&A. The first one is I always talk about the tone that we should take with respect to purpose. And for me, purpose isn't a campaign topic. It's the lens through which I view all of our campaigns and all of our storytelling. And the reason why that's important is, I'm going to make up the story, but like Lisa talked about Tom's. If Tom's was doing a lot of campaigns about like, hey, look at us, we've donated, 100,000 shoes, that message ultimately is going to fall flat because nobody needs that message. If they're talking about the superior product they have and the fact that for every time you buy a shoe, they donate one, that's an enduring message. That's the lens through which they're looking at the way they're shaping their product and conducting their business. And over time, people that enlists people, right, to contribute to it. It is not a self-congratulatory thing, which is my second point is the mindset that I always tell our team is, I think Deloitte's doing a lot, but the tone I always want to have is that what we are doing is a little drop of water in the ocean. And yet the ocean needs every drop of water. So that's a big piece for us. And then the last thing I would say is that I do believe that on, part of what we try to really ground our brand in is that with the world societal and economic and, all problems, you no longer can go it alone. So the more you can be in good company, the more you can work with others to address some of these problems, the better off you're going to be. So it really does take a village, and really helping to kind of break that down into what that looks like, I think is a critical part of landing purpose correctly over the long term. Okay, and last but not least, I've got a 13-year-old. We live in San Francisco, which has this ridiculous, but we're privileged and grateful that we have the opportunity, but we've got this process that comes into getting into high schools in San Francisco. And I've been doing lots of soul searching about who our family is and what the values are and where my son would be happy and all that sort of thing. And one of the school's mottos is really hinged around that, this notion that confidence doesn't come when you have all the answers, but it comes when you are ready to face the questions. And so I think that's a really great mindset for purpose and the topic that we have today.